The president depended on Jacobson during his first summit meeting with Khrushchev, and he continued to depend on the doctor's treatment through some of the most difficult periods of his presidency. Both Robert Kennedy and the official White House physician Janet Travell tried to convince the president he should stop seeing Jacobson, but they failed. According to Jacobson's records, he last saw the president in Florida as he was preparing for the November trip to Dallas. Max Jacobson's medical license was revoked in 1975 after one of his patients died from acute amphetamine. Brought tragedy to the president and his family.
It was in August of '63, and Jacqueline Kennedy went into labor and prematurely delivered the baby Patrick. I was assigned to escort the baby up to the Children's Hospital in Boston. And about 8 o'clock that night, the president arrived. And in the meantime, we had learned, of course, the baby was 4 pounds, 10 ounces and was in grave condition. And we got into the elevator. The doctor briefed the president on the condition of his son, which was not optimistic. And we got off on the ICU unit, and we passed a room where there were 2 delightful little girls, and one had severe burns up her throat. Her bib had caught on fire, and the other girl had a similar but separate incident with burns down her arm and huge pods on the end of her hands. And President Kennedy stopped, and he said, "I'd like to write a note to the children." So the nurse scurries to the station and gets the name of the children, and Kennedy writes a note to each child. He just did this spontaneously. And he said, "Can you see they get this?" And there was no fanfare, there was no photo op, there was no press release or anything. It was just a matter of empathy and concern for someone else. And then we proceeded down the hall to see his son, who, of course, died the next day. This was part of the dichotomy of the man. You could see so many qualities that just glowed that you couldn't see why he wanted to follow other roads that were so destructive. But after the death of Patrick, it was sort of like a metamorphosis in a sense that he was closer to her. And you saw him spend more time together in the White House. She would come over to his office. I remember clearly one evening, and she came over, and I'd never seen that before, and they walked back out down the airway back to the mansion. And that continued up to the trip to Dallas.
April 1974.
Where were you on the day of the assassination of John Kennedy?
I was standing out in front of the sheriff's office, which at that time was at 505 Main Street. They've moved it since then, but it was at 505 Main Street, directly in front of the front door.
Was the motorcade passing that area at that time?
No, we had to wait about 15 minutes before the motorcade arrived, but the sheriff had sent us out there that early to wait.
Were you merely a spectator, or were you on duty?
Well, no, I was on duty, but a couple hours before Kennedy was to arrive, the sheriff called us in, what I call the street people, the plainclothesmen, the detectives, and he instructed us that we were to stand out in front and in no way take part in the security of that motorcade, that we were merely spectators and nothing more.
Did that seem unusual to you?
It did to me at the time, because there were so many people around and so few Dallas police officers. This is one of the first things I noticed, was the lack of Dallas police officers. Try to keep the people back.
Adlai Stevenson, who had been assaulted in Dallas the previous month, and others, including Congressman Henry Gonzalez from San Antonio, Texas, had warned President Kennedy not to travel through Dallas. But the Secret Service told the president that he had nothing to worry about, since the greatest security in the history of the country for an American president, comprised of the coordination of all the local and federal police, had been set up for Dallas. Yet Roger Craig, an intelligent, instinctive police officer, and many other police officers were specifically told not to take part in the security that day. And Dallas-based FBI agent James Hosty, assigned to Lee Harvey Oswald, Oswald who had just returned from the Soviet Union, Oswald who was a high security threat by FBI standards. Mr. Hosty had no assignment to protect the president that day either. Hosty told a Congressional Investigating Committee many years later that he was having lunch down the street when the president was killed. The greatest security ever? Even the normal security on both the federal and local levels had been stripped away.
Another short one for you, another 4-minute DVD, but what I want to do is, again, it's one thing to come up here and espouse things, say things, and that, but picture says 1,000 words, and it's the great conundrum. Now, I said before, you know, about a conspiracy, no conspiracy, and it's separate from that. It's a matter of these guys would have protected the president, he would have lived whether Oswald acted alone or not. There is a little bit of a gray area in there, and it depends. Quite frankly, sometimes it depends on my mood, or if some of my researcher friends work on me a little bit to make me think it is sinister. I don't know. I mean, you try to put the best foot forward and say they screwed up and the president was killed under their watch, and after the fact, they created this mythology that he was difficult to protect, and that's when you read William Manchester's massive best-selling book. It sold like in the millions, you know, day Kennedy was shot, even the Warren Report to a certain extent, laid out this thing that, well, President Kennedy, that's a shame, but, you know, he did not want, you know, protection. Now, you didn't hear me get into the bubble top. That does seem to be something that Kennedy didn't want all the time, but even that is a gray area. There's many trips, you'll see a couple of them coming up, where he had the bubble top on, if not in a full compartment, which he did quite often. A lot of other times he'd have it in a partial configuration where he'd have the rear piece on and the forward piece. Now, even though it was not bulletproof, it would deflect a bullet, and many of the agents I spoke to said it would deflect a bullet, or at the very least, actually two things, or it would have a sun's glare off the bubble would act as a deterrent, or just the fact that many people thought it was bulletproof. What a potential sniper or snipers think twice, if not thrice, about doing anything. Oh, the bubble top's on, or the rear piece is on. So there you go. Many times, you'll see coming up, Kennedy was allotted many motorcycles that surrounded the car. It was protocol. In fact, on the Texas trip, San Antonio, Houston, and that morning in Fort Worth, the morning of the assassination, he had motorcycles all over the place. In the High Select Committee, this is kind of, well, it's not buried, researchers know about it, but it's buried in their report. Most people know about the Warren Report. High Select Committee reinvestigated the assassination in the late 70s and found a probable conspiracy, but very inconclusive, very unsatisfying. But one of the things they found was it was, quote, uniquely insecure what the Secret Service did with the allotment of motorcycles. And guess what? They blamed it on Kennedy. They said, hey, Kennedy didn't like this noise of the motorcycles by him. He couldn't have conversation. Geez, it must have been a new thing, because he didn't mind having those motorcycles all around him, up to and including the morning of the murder. He gets to Dallas. Hey, I want to hear now. Hey, get these motorcycles away. Hey, I didn't mind the agents beside me here. Oh, get them away now. And yeah, the press and photographers, you wouldn't need Abraham Zapruder. Normally, the press and photographers were in front, and you'll see in a second. Again, pictures, you don't have to believe me, you'll see for your own. The vantage point, a lot of times there was a flatbed truck in front of the motorcades to capture. They would have the national and international press, or just like the local press and the photographers capturing the motorcade. You wouldn't need all these amateurs. They were moved at the last minute. Tom Dillard even testified to the Warren Commission that left them in Chevrolet convertibles that put them totally out of the picture, literally, because they were stuck way back in the motorcade. They didn't even know what happened until it was too late. If they would have been in front, they would have been filming, hey, and they would have saw everything. Again, you might say, what's motorcycles going to do? If there was a sniper, it's a sniper. No. What it was, there would have been more professional witnesses to cover. Now, they would have covered them on the sides. Yes, you're right from a sniper's perspective. But if agents, now the Secret Service has even admitted this. So this isn't like, oh, this is your theory about what they would have done. The Secret, Louis Moretti testified in the late 90s about this, okay? That if agents would have been on the back of the car, it would have obscured Oswald's view. So agents being there would have been very important. And again, so it's their own words. But again, before anyone thought twice about this, they would throw out, well, President Kennedy, God bless him, it's a shame, but he didn't want this protection. But as you see, he didn't have a problem at all. And I'm contacting these people. And here's the most important thing of all, especially if you go out and you get Gerald Blaine's book, which I'm not, espousing, but hey, it's free country, get it if you want. You know, and if you go in there and you read and you say, well, you know, we had a code, he's talking about the Secret Service, and, you know, that code shouldn't be broken. And, you know, I'm waiting 47 years to tell you that President Kennedy did indeed order us out the car, and we covered this up. The thing he left out of the book, the real glaring error is, what about the non-Secret Service agents that said President Kennedy never wore us the car? You know, Dave Powers, who was on every trip Kennedy took, he was riding in the fob car often, writes to a total stranger and says, they never had to be told to get off the back of the car. Congressman Sam Gibbons, again, total stranger, writing to him, said that the agents rode on the rear of the car all the way. He was sitting a foot away from Kennedy. He never heard any order. So I'll wrap this up with a little 4-minute DVD. Now what this is silent, and it's 4 minutes long, and it's a compilation of prior motorcades, mostly in 1963. And again, don't need the sound on this, so I'll turn this all the way down here. Do a little narration on that too.
Okay, this is Bogota, Colombia. 2 agents, Bob Lilly, Roy Kellerman, on the back of the presidential limousine. There's the full bubble top. Excellent motorcycle formation, close follow-up car. Sam Kinney was driving that follow-up car. He was maintaining the normal distance. Bright, sunny day. Bob Lilly told me that many times the bubble top was on, either partial or full.
We're talking about the President of the United States. And I'm not a holy...
who had waited hours to see the president, the man dedicated to the defense of peace and freedom.
A unique 6-piece plexiglass bubble top roof was designed to be assembled in several configurations. A vinyl covering was occasionally placed over the bubble top, but this full-size removable hardtop was generally used when the Lincoln was transported by air. The spare tire was designed into the rear of the car, as the trunk space was essential for storing the bubble top sections and communications equipment. The rear deck grab handles were also installed at that time. This group was later reduced to 6, representing the Secret Service, the Army Materials Research Center, Pittsburgh Plate Glass, and Hessen-Eisenhardt. Careful consideration was given to all proposals regarding the presidential vehicle, but the most practical was to rebuild the SSX-100, as there wasn't sufficient time to design and build a completely new limousine for President Johnson. Plans were quickly approved by the White House, and the car was returned to Hessen.
And the man are inextricably linked. The memories of one stirring images of the other, specifically designed with the Secret Service in mind. It came with footstands and detachable grip handles that could be fitted to the trunk. For a generation of baby boomers, John Fitzgerald Kennedy represented a hopeful future, better opportunities, and a... Internationally, Kennedy's patience and diplomacy were also being sorely tested. Almost immediately after taking office, a symbol of America's power, his 1961 Lincoln.
His car with him, and that car, and him as president, it all comes together to stand for America and be what America is.
Our country's greatest losses.